All right, this is urgent. Is the crypto bull run over? Well, let's talk about it. This is NC Hammer Crypto. My name is Neil, where we keep technical analysis short and sweet. And we're actually looking at Bitcoin here, which moved a lot of the other markets. And we see that in between these two downward trend lines that are orange, we're trying to see more of a trend that is being placed. You could consider this a false bear breakout if it holds above this black trend line, which is support for these other 3 points. However, I believe we may even see lower, potentially 93K. You can even see it right here in the 5-hour news that it is doomed for 93K. The blue lines that I have plotted out right now are a rough example of what happened in the previous years and what potentially could be coming up here in the next few weeks. But with that being said, we're going straight to XCN because I feel like I missed it in the last video. And overall, XCN is still forming within this downward wedge. When we zoom up on this, let's make everything go away. You can see clearly that this is forming downwards. This is also, I guess, let's pull it up on another chart here. Let's go to crypto.com and see what we have going. So essentially, this is what we're looking at in XCN. It is in consolidation. It is now underneath the 200 EMA, which isn't the best, especially with Bitcoin decreasing in price. However, I believe we may see a little bit of support around the 0.13. What we'd also want to be looking at is the Fibonacci retracement from here to here. And when we're dragging that over, we can see it's exactly at the 0.618, which typically has some nice support and or resistance. So I believe we could see a little bit of support here, maybe come up and touch this top line. And if we break that, we are starting back with the bulls. However, I believe with Bitcoin dropping in price, we may revisit around even 0.12 before coming back into this wedge and filling out, trying to break this black trend line that's moving downwards. We'll make that a little bit bolder. So that's kind of the plan for XCN. It's more of an accumulation swing trade on this one at the moment. But when it does pop, you can see some astronomical gains such as this, like a 2,000% and or more. And with that being said, let's actually jump into the other big one, XRP. XRP, I had an inverse head and shoulders played out. Roughly, you can see within this chart pattern right here, inverse head and shoulders. We do want to see this start curving up and reaching back over to the 2.6. However, since it is cheaper, I always recommend accumulating more and more, as when we start entering into June, we are going to start seeing a little bit more movement, but I believe the major movement is still all the way in November. They want to play this thing out as long as possible, which is completely fine in my perspective, because the longer it's in consolidation, the bigger the pump. I don't believe we're going back down to 50 cents. I don't believe we're even going down to 95 cents. Anything's a possibility with what Bitcoin's about to do, I believe, dropping down to around 94,000. However, it does have a long retracement to go as well. So if we do a Fibonacci from Bitcoin's bottom to the high, also it would be right above the 0.5 area in the Fibonacci retracement, not even hitting the 0.618. We could see some support around here between 94 and 96 if it does have a continuation drop, which in turn will drop the rest of the markets. BNT, we were up over 100%. We had to sell somewhere in here around the 72-cent mark, and we are currently trying to build some support and or consolidation over this 200 EMA. When we remove this Fibonacci and draw in a new one, we can see from the bottom to the high, right in that area. The 0.53 is a potential retracement for BNT, depending on what Bitcoin does. LCX is doing some consolidation, still not holding well over that 15-cent mark, which is kind of what we're looking for before we start seeing it up to push up to the 0.17. I'm still sitting out on LCX no matter what they say. If it can hit $50, I'm waiting to see a potential entry within LCX. Doge had its rejection at 24. Major rejection back down underneath the 200 EMA. However, we may get some support right around this area. As you can see, something similar to that. It may have a little bit of support in this area. Fibonacci from the bottom to the top. Still right in the 0.618, so that's where the support comes in, as we can see is happening at this moment. Also, if you're looking down at the RSI in the 4 hour, it is oversold. We do want to see that push up to the 50.00 roughly mark before we start seeing a movement either downwards or upwards. QNT is one I've been looking at. It's been pushing up very nicely since we got in at 75. However, we had a scalp trade just the other day, like I was talking about. This is very short, tiny time frames compared to the 4 hour time frames that we have been looking at. I had an entry right around here at the 106.80, only scalped a few bucks up into this area, 2%, but that's what a stock trader makes in a month. So a 2% gain was not bad on that. And then we had a re-entry right around here, around 107, and a sell because we're on this downward trend line, expecting it to tap and get resistance, as it did with Bitcoin's drop and pushed underneath that 200 EMA. We do have high volume, which is nice to see in the 15-minute. When we zoom out to the 4 hour, the volume is decreasing, the price is increasing. We would consider that divergence, but not for sure validation. It is also at the 50% mark on the RSI, and it did not break through the CM guppy lines, meaning the water still is a little bit hot. However, I believe we may see some consolidation and some further rejection if Bitcoin continues to move further south. With that being said, XYO had its consolidations, its funky patterns. It's still trying to play out. However, we could see a continuation downwards on this, as it is now below this fair value gap, also below the 200 EMA. And the main thing is it's oversold at the moment. And when we fib this, you can see from the bottom to the top here, we are past that 0.618 retracement. We are all the way down at 0.786. May get some support. However, the next drop could be 0.007. I personally don't think we will drop that low, but it is possible, as Bitcoin, when it drops like 5%, the rest of the markets drop like 20%. This is XPR, still in its consolidation, but it is trying to hold above that 200 EMA, which is looking a little bit better. However, with this compared to XCN, I'd be waiting to see XCN drop a little bit before just having a more clear confirmation on what is a good buy. XLM also I wanted to bring up. Inverse head and shoulders all the way back down to the side of the right shoulder here. And I believe this is going to be more of a support line. We're probably going to see some support in this area. And also, if it does break that support, I believe the next area is around 0.22 before getting support and start pushing back upwards. GRT and torn. Bitcoin goes down 5%, the markets get slaughtered. It did not hold above the 12-cent mark, which is what we were hoping for, and it had a further rejection with Bitcoin's move downwards. So now we are considering trying to break this black line, make that a little bit thinner, while pushing up over the 200 EMA and the 10-cent mark before potentially getting a better validation. You could even consider a potential inverse head and shoulders on this. It's optimistic, but it's not any kind of validation. It's just something I would like to see happen within this area. And once we hold over that 0.10 mark and break above the 0.12, I believe we're going to start seeing it push back up towards the 22-cent mark. And tornado back at $9.30, still not very far off from where we had entry at $7.50. However, unlike some of the other markets that we've been looking at, this is actually holding very nicely in the 4 hour above the 200 EMA. When we bring it into the daily, also holding above the 200 EMA, and I believe we could see some major movement. Like when you're looking back here over in January of 22nd, in one day, had a major pop out of nowhere all the way up 237%. 237% is pretty massive gains for one day, and then a few days later, we're back below that. But now we are holding above that 200 EMA nicely. We're still at the 50 area on the RSI, and it is starting to show a little bit of bullish potential. So keeping all that in mind, that's kind of it for today. I do want to bring back in that Quant and XCN are starting to build some support. When we break these downward trend lines, we are going to start seeing some moves upward. But overall, we want to keep an eye on Bitcoin and what it is doing next. It did have a pretty far drop, as we can see, but it is potentially going to get some strong support off this 200 EMA, as well as having the RSI in the oversold area for the 4 hour at least. I believe we could see a nice little peak up, pushing the CM Guppy into the little bit of green area, but we could also just see a rejection, a false breakout here, and push it all the way down here to the 94, 90, 93 area. So that's it for today. I always recommend Grass Token, reference link in the links below. Free airdrop money. They're dropping money in, I believe, a month. So I will bring Grass Token into my videos here when I get my airdrop and kind of explain how much money I got for free from just downloading an app on my computer, as well as Roller Coin. There's a reference link below if you want free money for playing a game for passing time, and MEXC for the lowest trading fee platform, as well as Coinbase for airdrop tokens. That's it for today, and I hope this helps. I will see you guys on the next one.